Paddy, you're back from the pub.
Yes, it was the outside broadcast position, the OBL, which unfortunately also was a PUB.
I love an acronym. Was it worth it?
Yes, it was worth it because it's very good beer and people of Sheffield were very chatty about the hosepipe ban because Yorkshire Waters brought one in.
Sheffield is a fine city, the steel city and the very, very hot city like everywhere else today.
Yes, it was Scorchio. But people, they said to me, look, the reservoirs are empty. My family lives in the Peak District, they said. One man
Lovely,
said to me,
the Peak District.
said that reservoirs are empty. So they know there's no water. You can't blame it all on the water companies. They leak a lot, as we know. But people thinking, this is a big natural crisis, so we've got to react.
Oh, and there wasn't much water. Was there much beer?
Yes, plenty of beer, thank goodness. So you had to drink it.
Tremendous. Shall we get on?
We must.
It's Laura in the studio.
It's Paddy in the studio.
And hooray!
It's Joe Pike also in the studio. Hi, Laura. Hi, Paddy.
Lovely to have you with us.
Well, now, do we begin with the Ofcom chief on your sofa?
I think we should, because we've talked about this a lot on Newscast. We've talked about it a lot on the news in the last couple of years. Everybody knows that these things can be marvellous and they can be fun and wonderful, and technology is an amazing thing, but they can also lead to terrible things happening, particularly for children and teenagers. And we've covered that a lot on the show. And we've talked to some amazing families who have opened up about the dreadful things that have happened to them, whether that's Ian Russell, who was with us this morning, whose daughter Molly died, Esther Jai, whose daughter Brianna died, or the 4 families who are taking on one of the tech platforms and are suing TikTok. But the rules on all this are actually, after a long time, about to change. The boss of Ofcom is the woman in charge of making sure that actually works, putting into practice the Online Safety Act, which took years and years for politicians to get around to passing through Parliament.
And it does seem strange that this legislation was passed in, October 2023? That's when it got royal assent. And yet the key bit that's going to hopefully allay some of the concerns of parents and change what kids get access to is only coming in, July 2025. This was Rishi Sunak's government that made this happen. And as you talked about in your show, Laura, because of AI in particular, the technology is changing so fast. Does legislation move anywhere near as fast as the potential dangers are for kids? And
that's one of the criticisms of this, is it's already sort of out of date. But should we hear how Melanie Dawes described this moment? Because whether or not you think it covers absolutely everything, people at Ofcom, campaigners and politicians would still say that this is a big moment that's about to happen.
What happens at the end of this month is that we see the wider protections for children come online. And so what we're expecting to see then is that any company that shows material that shouldn't be available to under 18s, pornography, suicide and self-harm material, that should be either removed from their service, or they're going to need highly effective age checks to screen out under 18s. There's a lot more than that, but this is a big moment. And we're already starting to see some change, but we're under no illusions at Ofcom about the really quite challenging path ahead.
It's extraordinary to think that there are families making these decisions all over the country about what age it's appropriate to give a highly sophisticated computer to, with access to porn, suicide tips, and violent beheading videos galore. That's what's available to children. So it seems obvious to parents, don't let it be available to them. And it's taken government absolutely forever to catch up with this. And now it's in the hands of Ofcom, who basically regulate broadcasting, in the electronic publication, basically, I suppose we could say. But I think what you've done by bringing the parents into the TV studio is to sort of make all of us understand that, look, these decisions are happening round the table. So it's absolutely over time for government to work out what the big structure is, because I think there's probably lots of parents listening who just ban the phones to their kids anyway.
Well, that is one of the very simple sounding solutions that some people say, yeah, that's what we should do. And there's also another simple sounding solution saying, yeah, just ban phones in schools, or just ban smartphones for under 16s. But every simple solution always comes up then with a sort of complicated, but what about in this circumstance? And what about that circumstance? And actually, when it comes to schools, for example, we had an email to the show this morning from a grandparent saying, look, actually, we've got a kid who suffers from all sorts of issues and anxieties. they feel that they really need to have their phone with them, or else they just simply wouldn't go to school. And I'm not to go into that particular case, but there are, for every simple sounding solution, there are, of course, 10, what if this and what if that? But I think, as you say, we've heard from viewers and listeners, and newscasters let us know what you think. Overtly, repeatedly and frequently and sometimes angrily over the last few years, and frustratedly, actually, sometimes people saying, look, give us help, politicians. This is too big for any one family to deal with on its own. It's too big for any one school to deal with this on its own. And one of the criticisms is certainly that Ofcom has taken too long coming forward with these codes. And one of the other criticisms is that they have gone too far in trying to work with the industry in terms of allowing them to decide how they're going to do this all, rather than saying, no, you've got to do it like this and you've got to do it like that.
And some of the verification will include facial verification, which
Yeah.
sounds like a very interesting bit of technology. And also it knowing your birth date, the website or the app knowing your birth date because of your credit cards or your bank account. So there is technology that I don't think we've necessarily seen used in that age verification before, but will we find out in a month or so that actually there are ways to get around all of this?
Well, we don't know. And there are still lots of question marks about how the platforms are already going to do it. But just, a lot of this is often descends into something quite technical. But what is definitively happening is that from July the 25th, tech platforms will have to carry out age checks to make sure that under 18s don't see harmful material. How that will happen and whether it will be effective, we cannot answer those two questions yet.
Now, you had a Conservative on, and as you've earlier pointed out, this was Conservative legislation, and I remember plenty of rows about it at the time, with people saying it was the wrong legislation. So there was another argument in the past. It's been passed. So Chris Philp was on, speaking to you as a dad as well as a politician, which kind of is the interface of what I was trying to get at earlier. And I wondered, did he talk about how he sorts it out in his life?
As a dad myself, I am really concerned about this, and I don't want, like my own children who are on the cusp of becoming teenagers, to get addicted by social media apps and by smartphones. It's a really serious concern, although I think we are moving in the right direction now that Ofcom are implementing the Online Safety Act, which the last government passed. But I share Ian Russell's concern, and they do need to go faster in getting these codes of practice actually implemented.
He doesn't want his kids to see harmful material on smartphones, and his kids, I think, are about to become teenagers, and he said he's really worried about it. And he also said he wished that the Tories had made phones illegal and actually banned them in schools when they had been in office.
You see, that's quite candid, because I was saying it was their legislation. There was a libertarian row at the time about it.
Yeah, there were two different rows. So there was a row about whether or not they should ban phones in schools altogether, or ban smartphones in schools, or ban smartphones for under 16s. The Tories didn't do any of that. What they did do was say to schools, we think you shouldn't have phones in the classrooms, but they didn't actually change the law. And Chris Philp said to us this morning, he wishes they had made that the law. The Tories are now still trying to do that in Parliament, actually. And we spoke to Chris Philp about that. And we also got the response from Heidi Alexander, who was the Labour Cabinet Minister, with us this morning on this.
So we need to get the balance right. Lots of schools have controls in place already where they remove smartphones from kids during the school day. So lots of head teachers are determining what is the right policy. Some mums and dads also want their kids to have a phone on their way to school so that if something happens when they're on the bus, those sorts of things they can feel confident that their child has a means of communicating. And so we've got to get the balance right. But as I say, schools do have, powers to take decisions about what is right for their pupils and their school.
The other row, though, which goes really, I think, to what's still at the heart of all this, is when this was all going through Parliament, there was an almighty hoo-ha, or ha-hoo, as you sometimes say, Paddy, about whether or not content that is not against the law, but is grisly and grim, legal but harmful, as it became known, should that be covered by legislation or not? And it was one Kemi Badenoch, oh gosh, she ended up in a rather big job, who said that Parliament shouldn't legislate for hurt feelings, and the notion of making it of legal but harmful was dropped from the bill. It's still there for under 18s, and that's why these age checks are coming in. But in the bigger debate about the internet, Ofcom will not block harmful content for adults. So for most users from appearing on the internet, illegal stuff they'll tell people has to come down, but harmful material, whether that is about eating disorders, self-harm, all sorts of things, that will still be permitted on the internet for adults or for kids who are smart enough to get around age checks.
I mean, it's all proceeding at such a pace. Last week, Elon Musk's AI Grok was praising Hitler. So
Right.
that, it's wherever the legislation is, it's not really normal to praise Hitler, Elon. But his little Grok was praising Hitler. So the canary's been tweeting away for a long time, pardon the pun. And then I visited a school where their version of it is you arrive at school and you lock your smartphone in a pouch.
Yep.
And you have to hand it in.
Yep.
But of course, what the children were telling me was that when you leave the school gates, that's not policed except by the parents. So one parent might be saying you can use it, another might be saying you can't, and then also you can sledge a child, you can bully a child once they leave the gate from your own phone to theirs.
There's an interesting thing, Joe, that from conversations I've had over the last couple of years about this, I think there's a generational thing amongst younger MPs and newer MPs coming in saying, this is a thing that we really, really, really have to grasp. And there's a slightly older generation who are in a bit of a different mindset. Would you agree with that? I mean, I
Absolutely. I think especially people who are MPs and are parents of the age of kids sort of approaching that, who really can empathise with a lot of the people you've spoken to on your programme, and they have such direct contact evidence that kids of that age are accessing such harmful material. And all of the polling and stats shows the terrifyingly young age, we're talking about sort of 10, 11, 12, 13, that kids, a large portion of kids see the most hardcore types of pornography. And you did have with Josh McAllister, a new young Labour MP coming in last year, an effort in a private members bill initially to try and ban phones in schools, among other things. Then he ditched that. Chris Philp and the Tories are trying to do it now. But the view in government, in Bridget Phillipson's department, the Education Secretary, is that there is already guidance there. Schools understand what the rules are. Effectively criminalising people in the education system isn't the answer. And also, as you sort of touched on, Paddy, there are examples where parents might want to still be able to have contact with their kids in certain scenarios, or there might be a kid who has some form of learning difficulty or disability where there's a real importance of having that technology on them. And of course, that can be added to legislation, but the Education Department don't want to go anywhere near, at least in England, because education's evolved, dealing with that.
But the politics of this are quite interesting. So one of the MPs involved said to me the other day, if there was a reshuffle and there was a new education secretary, I would go into them and say, ditch the battle with the Tories, just get on and do this, because it would be popular. And for a Labour government with no cash, it wouldn't cost them any money. Right. So the politics of this might shift. And I think they already have started to shift more broadly. So forget about schools for a second. But Peter Kyle, the tech secretary, when he was last on the programme, talked about how he wants to move towards tackling the addictive nature of some apps. Heidi Alexander said that again this morning. And we've had pretty strong hints, really, and Ian Russell, the safety campaigner, backed that up this morning, that even maybe as early as after the summer, there might be a whole new round of extra legislation, because there is privately acknowledgement that this is already out of date. And even Melanie Dawes herself this morning said, yeah, look, we have to concentrate on the things we can already do, but there may well have to be more rules coming down the track. And it's funny because you've got a big bit of legislation that's only just really coming into force. And already everybody's saying, or not everybody, but already there are many people saying, we're going to have to do more.
Big tech firms, you can point the finger at them, which you did. What did she say, the Ofcom?
Well, she said she wanted to force a big cultural change in Silicon Valley. Question, can one country's regulator, very senior former civil servant, but one country's regulator really be, taking on the might of Meta, X, all the other platforms that are out there? But this is what she said.
We are trying to make them change. And, I think it is a very big moment for the industry, a very serious moment. And the reason why people are making changes, though, is because they've seen that Ofcom's ready to enforce. That's where we prioritise that in the spring and have opened up really quite a lot of investigations already. So, there'll be more to come.
As I mentioned earlier, Ofcom is this quango,
Yeah.
which is the gatekeeper for electronic publications,
Yeah.
which it also includes the BBC.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to do any broadcasting on the BBC without talking about the BBC. And every time that there's a row, it can either involve Downing Street or Ofcom, depending on what row it is.
Or both.
Or both.
Yes.
So there's a couple of rows which do involve Ofcom.
There are.
And the government has left open a question about whether it has confidence in the Director General of the BBC.
Yes.
So is Ofcom confident in the leadership of the BBC?
I think the way that Melanie Dawes expressed herself this morning on this issue left a question mark in her faith in the leadership of the BBC. So I asked her, did she have faith in the leadership of the BBC to sort it out or to get a grip, to use her phrase? It is what happened at Glastonbury with the broadcast of hideous chants against the Israeli Defence Force. And also the upcoming report into what went wrong with the documentary about Gaza, which has not been released yet, but I think it will be released quite soon. So there are some bubbling issues that centre around the BBC's handling in its coverage, whether that's music or news or documentary or anything else, of the Gaza-Israel conflict. So Melanie Dawes this morning said, BBC, get a grip. If you don't get a grip, you risk losing public confidence. And I think she put a question mark under the leadership of the BBC. She didn't say, I don't have faith, but I thought, I don't know, Joe, if you were listening to that particular bit, but to my ear, there was a certain openness, shall I say. An open question was left.
Yeah, and I think maybe is an echo of Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary's quite punchy interventions and certainly briefing from people in her department about her frustration with the corporation. We should say certainly the PM's official spokesman, when I've been in lobby meetings, has said he has confidence, the PM has confidence in the BBC leadership.
So that was interesting. The Culture Secretary went out quite far last weekend, but then actually the centre of government, Downing Street, seems to have pulled back a little bit from that view.
Yes, because she said this is a question of leadership.
Yes.
And you reminding us that when they were able to revisit it with several days later. But it's still not where you want to be if you are running an organisation, for one government minister to say your leadership's in doubt and then someone else to say, oh, well, it's probably all right. It doesn't look like a home run.
No, and you don't want the regulator to say you need to get a grip and there are repeated own goals, to use her phrase.
Right. Well, so we raise it because if we don't raise it, people think we're deliberately not raising it.
We're not raising it because we like being self-indulgent.
And then when you do raise
about
it,
ourselves all the time.
Yeah, people say, can you stop talking about yourselves? So we've done an adequate job in talking about the latest discussion of the BBC on the BBC. So
Yes.
Is it possible we can now move on to anything else?
I hope so.
Okay, so there is breaking news as well this Sunday. We try and bring the journalism from around the climate, the journalism climate, and it is about the looming doctors' strike in England, which is to say that having said on Friday that everything was non-negotiable, it now looks like the government and the health department are going to be talking.
But not, Wes Streeting's team say, about salaries. The doctors have already, junior doctors, this is resident doctors they're now called, have already been offered this 5.4% pay rise after 22% from the previous 2 years. And Wes Streeting will be meeting the BMA representatives this week to talk about conditions, but not, he says at the moment, pay, because there isn't any money according to the health department. Really interesting how I think Wes Streeting and his team have been trying to manage this. Obviously, the worry is if this goes ahead in a fortnight's time, we have these 5 days of strikes, all of those efforts to cut waiting lists, which really is, I mean, I think Wes Streeting's sort of political future is predicated on him sorting that out. That is all going to, a lot of problems are going to be caused there. But they have been, I think, quite front-footed on trying to make it clear what they think public opinion on this is, because there was certainly a lot of public support under the last government, seemingly, for nurses striking, other healthcare workers striking. The view in a lot of government is that support amongst the public is slightly waning for junior doctors, and that is part of the sort of negotiating strategy.
Yes, I mean, it looks. We were talking. Sorry, we were talking a bit on BH today about there being a backlash against the BMA. It's not. I'm not saying it's a total backlash, but it is a partial one, because one of the key medical figures in the United Kingdom, Robert Winston, resigned from the BMA, saying they've called this wrong, and that actually this is the wrong time to do it on top of all the other things that are going on in the country. Then you link it to Labour's dispute with Unite, and they just need to sort of stop the strikes or sort out the unions.
Strife, yeah.
Or be the party that the unions like, because at the moment there's this moving target, isn't there, about what Labour government is if you're a Labour trades union.
Well, that's right. And rows are never as bitter as they are inside the same family, right? And I think there is a running issue here that may well get worse in the run-up to the party conference season. You know, we were talking about it a bit yesterday. Is this actually building strife between Labour and its traditional backers, not forgetting, as you pointed out yesterday, that's this potential new force on the left? What is Jeremy Corbyn going to do? He spoke to one of my old colleagues in the BBC North East, Stuart Winkup, yesterday at the Durham Miners' Gala, and didn't categorically answer the question, but did say along the lines of, well, of course, if there's a new movement, of course I'll be part of it. So for the Labour Party, there are real questions here about their core support.
Because
now, Keir Starmer's core supporter has never been the Corbynistas.
No.
But the movement as a whole, it's not a small deal for the leader of Unite to come out and say, not just we're cross about the bins in Birmingham, not just we're cross about Angela Rayner not coming into the room, but to say you are not doing the right thing for the workers who were part of putting you into office.
Because I was linking it, because one of the things Wes Streeting articulated was that it needed a Labour government to end the strike. I'm sure I heard that from him about 10 months ago.
Well, that's what they claimed, yeah.
That's what they, we've taken this decision to end the strike. So that's what the linkage is politically. It's like you can't be the government that was necessary to end it if you then have another strike 10 months later.
And you can't take the credit and then pretend the problem's got nothing to do with you. Perish the thought that politicians would ever do that. Surely not.
And Sharon Graham of Unite has also said in the past couple of days that disaffiliation, decoupling Labour and Unite, one of the biggest trade unions in the country that used to be Labour's biggest donor, is on the cards. It's something that she is and her members are considering. Now, she has she's become a very different type of leader of that union than her predecessor, and is not that interested in Labour politics, she said. She's more interested in her workers and disputes like the Birmingham bin dispute. But the idea that a union that gives Labour about
1.2 million quid,
yeah, over $1 million a year, which actually ensures that Labour staff and head office keep their jobs and sort of the machinery of the party continues, that might be disappearing. And there are senior people who are connected to Unite who think that maybe some of that money should be spent on other political parties and movements.
And
is that the case? That's fascinating. So there are people in Unite who are telling you they might put their support behind the Corbyn new outfit.
I should say not the leadership. This is not Sharon Graham or her team, but because there are a lot of people within Unite, or a chunk of people within Unite, who are upset at Keir Starmer's policy decisions, in particular on things like winter fuel and on disability benefits, and see other options. And of course, you've got the Greens, you've got this Corbyn-led independent opportunity. There could be something that those union figures think is a better place to put their cash.
How interesting. And we should say also, and I don't want to spare your blushes, or I do want to spare your blushes. I never know which way round that phrase is actually meant to go.
Why don't we have him not blush at all?
Okay. Joe did excellent investigations into some, should we say, dodgy dealings, is that fair, that went on at Unite under the old leadership?
Yeah, mainly a very big, expensive hotel in Birmingham.
Yes. So you know your onions when it comes to talking about what goes on inside Unite the Union. So that's very interesting indeed to hear that there are considerations about them putting their money into places other than the Labour Party.
Yes, I follow your reporting a lot, and it's not the first time I've been schooled by you. Thank you very much for listening and watching this weekend.
Thank you very much indeed.
Goodbye.